Okay.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to How to Live to Be a Happy, Healthy Old Man. And today we are joined by one of my favorite people in the world, and his name is Dale Quaint. So let me just say
John,
thank you very much for joining us and having me in your home today.
good to see you.
Absolutely.
Yes.
And Dale and I have known each other for several years, and he's got a really interesting set of daily things that he's involved in. And my original whole idea here was to talk to people older than me who are super fit and healthy and learn how can I get to be there, just like I would hope that some 30, 40-year-old might want to know from me in my 50s how to get here. Then I realized healthy isn't all of it. It's a huge part of life, but if a person's not happy, what good does all the money or the most beautiful wife or whatever do? And so in these conversations, we talk about the different aspects of happiness, including health and a variety of other things. And what I've known of Dale is that he is very involved in the community, and he's got a really interesting personal journey, and I think we can learn a lot from some things that he's got to tell us, because he is, I believe, one of the most serene, happy, wise people I know, and I hope you get some really good stuff out of this, so pay attention. And Dale, thank you again very much for joining us. Let's kind of jump in, if we can, maybe go through, well, first of all, how old are you?
I am 75 years old.
Okay, that is awesome.
Yes.
That's always right, just to make it that far.
My qualifications.
Okay,
Yes.
Well, yeah, and I always wondered if people would be offended by the old, but the idea is that I think we want to be, we want to live as long as we can. I mean, hopefully, like, we all go to heaven, but nobody wants to die to get there, or that kind of thing, right? So, as opposed to how many people we've seen that didn't make it as far as you and I are, even. Right?
I got kind of fooled by the healthy old age thing, because for my first 70 years on this planet, I was in perfect health. I went decades without seeing doctors or medications or anything at all. And I had this crazy idea that somehow I was going to get bypassed on the old age thing, that I was going to be the exception and live forever, healthy. And then ran into some difficulties with my heart and subsequent operations, and life has changed, and it has been an adjustment. Yes.
That's putting it mildly, right? So you're not an example of health physically, right?
At this moment, no. I've still got some health difficulties, yes.
Yet you're not sitting there all depressed and upset, or maybe you go through those, but how do you deal with the changes life throws at you that you didn't anticipate or desire, but you got them?
As I look at it and looking back on it and going through the difficulties, it seems to me that acceptance of reality is a very, very important part. And initially, my wife laughs at me over this, but this is the truth. Because I thought I was going to somehow magically go through all these operations and difficulties. And somehow I was going to come out the other side, and I would be not only in perfect health, I was going to be 19 years old again. I know that sounds crazy, but that's really what I had in my head. And obviously I had to go through a period of, again, back to acceptance, that that's not the way this works out. I have a good friend of mine, he put it very bluntly one day when I was telling him about dealing with some of this. And he says, dude, you're 75 years old. This is the kind of stuff that happens when you're 75 years old. That was a process of getting to that acceptance, because there's always more that you have to deal with, and there's doctor's appointments, and there's medications, and all that other kind of stuff. And again, I have this crazy idea that I'm going to be 19, and that turned out to be a very irrational thought process, if that makes any sense.
It does. It does. And I think there's probably a lot of people out there who, given your circumstances, might find themselves very depressed or self-medicating or self-absorbed or just miserable to be around, and that's not the case for you. So if we're talking to other people that are, 50 to 80 who are experiencing things and it's dragging them down, how do you not let that happen? How do you get acceptance?
First of all, I spent a large portion of my life until I was 52 years old self-medicating myself. I did it from the time I was a kid. I did it with alcohol. I did it with drugs. It got, like it always does. It didn't end nicely. But it forced me to look at myself and to look at reality. And the number one determination is that's got to stop. I've got to find a different way to live my life. I cannot continue in the direction that I had been going my entire life. I learned so much by developing the tools necessary to do that, to put your old life down and start a new life with new aspirations and new goals and new all of that. It's a constant, ongoing learning process. I've read a number of quotes by people like Aristotle and Mark Twain and people like that, the big thinkers. And all of them at some point have a quote concerning the difficulty of changing ourselves, right? I believe it's Aristotle that says, he who conquers himself is greater than he who conquers a city, right? They all have similar, every one of them has a similar type of quote. And I have found that to be true. It's not, I like to say, we'd like to push a magic button, think, and the problems go away. We all would like that.
Sure.
But it requires attention, acceptance, faith is a big part of it, and a determination, really, you mentioned it. It is a determination to find a way to be happy and contented in this world, regardless of what's going on. Or it doesn't matter what's going on. That's sometimes not the easiest thing in the world to do, but it's a very worthwhile journey.
Well, thank you. Faith. You gave me a bunch of rabbit holes to go down. Did you come from a religious family? Where does, tell us about how faith fits in your life. How did you come to be so wise as you are now?
I was anti-religious.
Okay.
I've been that way since I was a kid. I somehow developed the idea when I was 11 or 12 years old. Don't know where it came from. But the idea that developed in me when I was 11 or 12 years old was God didn't want to have anything to do with me. Right? And literally, I got that thought when I was 11 or 12 years old, and I held on to it till I was 52 years old. As far as I'm concerned, that was the truth. There was no sense trying that because it wasn't going to work because God didn't like me. By practicing the principles that are presented, and for me, a lot of it is being a member of a 12-step program and being taught how to practice spiritual principles, being shown that the steps that are necessary to do that. And I can tell you, I was the most surprised guy in the world where all of a sudden, by doing that, prayer had an effect. Prayer was helping. It had never helped me before in my life. Not 1 minute did it help me. Always used to, quite frankly, used to make me angry because I could pray and pray and pray. I may as well have been reading the phone book, right? And then all of a sudden, I'm saying prayers because I'm surrounded by people who taught me to pray. And I didn't think it was going to work, and it works. It just flat works. Yes.
Thank you. And again, you gave me a lot of ways to go about that. You talked about community. And one thing that I've learned about one 12-step program in its own literature mentions how the same plan of action and steps that are there to help people specifically escape the issues that they're involved there could be so helpful for regular people that don't have that aren't facing alcoholism or addiction or overeating or whatever. How would a person, what are some of the steps that if a person's facing just normal life problems, and let's say that they don't have any addictions or isms or you know?
I believe it is a very rare human being in this world that doesn't have addictions of some kind. Now, most of us think of addictions as substance abuse, alcohol, cocaine, meth, whatever, right? Certainly that's a big problem, right? But I also look at very carefully in some of the work I do with people in prison, really is looking at behavior addictions. I mean, how many behaviors do most of us have and have had for a very, very long time that cause us difficulties, right? Anger, usually the easiest example is anger. How many times have we got angry at somebody or something and created madness and chaos beyond anything we ever expected to do? We can clearly see that's a destructive process. Does that stop us from doing it? No. We continue to do it. One of the early ones that I started to look at was anger. And that was when I started to look at that, I said, okay, that is an addiction. I've been doing it all my life. I've been shooting myself in the foot all my life. Why can't I stop doing it? And found some solutions for that. Beginning with accepting the fact that it's an addiction. I do it. Shopping, spending, sex, gambling, the list is infinite in the number of things that people do, generally seeking something to make them feel good. Generally, that's the reason. And over time, it goes from something that feel good, that it's a nice little hobby or distraction or whatever, and then all of a sudden you're married to it and you can't get out of it. You're stuck in it. And I think that's the big problem that most people have. And obviously as we age, the older we get, the more likely that is to show up.
Sure.
At least that's my experience, right? Oh.
Wow. Again, you keep giving me, there's so many things that I'd love to explore here. You mentioned that you work in prisons and you help people that are in prison.
Yes.
Tell us, why are they there? What do you do for them?
I work for a nonprofit organization that has a reentry program inside the women's prison in Homestead. And we do a couple of different classes a year of 25, 30 people. And the programs are for 5 months long, 5.5 months long. And we meet 5 days a week. There's a couple different instructors. We do business and life skill type things. I do trauma and addiction. Another woman comes in and it's anger management type of stuff. And for 5 months, and the idea is the reason that we are there, not many people know this, but in the United States, the recidivism rate in the United States, recidivism rate is the percentage of people that are rearrested after they leave prison. Our recidivism rate in the United States is, of everybody released from a prison, a jail, whatever, in the United States, 50% will be rearrested within 12 months of their release. 50%. Up to 77% will be rearrested within 5 years. That's a really scary statistic. Really scary.
Almost hopeless, right? Like
it's what it looks like, yes.
Okay.
So, and I use that obviously in what I do inside the prisons. If you don't do anything, if you don't look at this as an inmate and begin to make changes in yourself before you leave.
That's okay, we don't do any editing here, so
good.
Life happens.
I'll leave it as it is. If you don't do something before you leave the prison, you're almost guaranteed to come back to the prison.
Yeah,
I mean,
half to 2/3.
Statistically, it's a slam dunk. And I present that, and this is the reason we do this, and please pay attention to this, and let's look for the reasons. And generally speaking, in most of the classes that I do, most of the people have been there more than once. I've had classes with people that have been rearrested and resentenced 5 and 6 times. It's common, very common. And we try to present the solution to them, why this happens, and what you need to prevent that. This is what's happened in this country, in a lot of different neighborhoods. You got people being released without really being shown what they need to do. Maybe they can't get a job, they can't get medical attention, they can't support themselves. You know, it's an endless list of things that they have no experience at, right? Other than illegal activities. We discussed that also. I says, I know any one of you could walk out of this prison and you could be making money before you get out of the parking lot. And they all go, that's right, we can. Right? And that's a temptation. I mean, if you're homeless and you're helpless, what are you going to do? So the end result is, do we want to send them out worse than when they started, which is what we're doing? Or do we want to give them a hand and help them so that they're no longer a problem to society? And our recidivism rate, I'm quite proud of this, our recidivism rate is 5%.
Wow.
Right.
So if they have gone through your program, it takes it from 50 to 75 down to 5%.
Down to 5%.
That's wonderful.
Yes, yeah. It's very gratifying.
How long have you been doing this?
10 years.
And have any of those people further gone into helping others?
Oh yeah, we've got 2 women that are running their own treatment centers.
Wow.
Yeah,
Neat.
in that, yes. And we've got a lot of people who are gainfully employed and taking care of themselves, and they have families and they're taking care of their children. Yes, we have quite a few. Yeah, and yes, that's very gratifying.
Absolutely. And that you were placed, the universe conspired to put you in the right place to actually be part of that whole chain.
It was absolutely, you used the word the universe gave me, and that's exactly what happened. I was not looking for it. I was going into prisons and I was doing, again, 12-step stuff strictly. And I was working in a treatment center at the time. And the treatment center said, we want to teach you about what they call trauma-informed care, right? Which at the time was not that big a deal. It's big now. And I said, okay, fine, I'll do that. And as a result of that, I wound up getting a phone call from this program saying, hey, how would you like to be an instructor for this program? And I found out later that the head of the program was somewhat hesitant to hire me because I'm a male and it's an all-female class.
Right.
But she did it anyway. There was some discussion with the heads of the prison that, you know, maybe I wasn't the best choice. They weren't sure that having a male as an instructor was a good idea. And I got some recommendations and we got over that. But all of a sudden I found myself, just exactly as you said, here I am. And they said, go ahead, do what you want to do.
That's wonderful.
Yeah, it was wonderful. It is wonderful.
It continues to be wonderful.
Continues to be wonderful.
Thank you for your service to the world, because the world is a better place because of that whole program and what you do there.
I tell them this all the time in there. I say, the best thing I do for myself is go in there and help them.
How do you mean that?
Get back to peace of mind, happiness, acceptance, continuing to learn, okay? Every class that I get, my curriculum changes. I hear things in that class and go, oh, we need to look at that. I haven't looked at that yet. So it's there's a constant growth going on because I go in and I do that. And that's really a huge advantage in this deal.
So yeah, a lot of people don't continue to learn after they're no longer being forced to, like in high school or college.
Yes.
I heard a great quote about that the other day. And would you go to a 50-year-old doctor who hadn't done any further learning after he graduated from med school 20, 30 years before?
Right.
Of course not. Right? Well, why should any of us really think that someone would want us the longer in the tooth that we get if we don't continually improve, seek out more knowledge, perhaps learn how we can contribute or give more, or just be a current participant, right?
I had lost the ability to learn in my old life.
In your drugs and alcohol?
In the drugs and alcohol and all, it was gone. I couldn't pick up a textbook and read it and learn from it, right? And I will admit that I am now very excited about the idea that there's stuff I can learn every day. I mean, it's endless. It's, there's more spirituality to learn, more faith to learn, more working with others. And yeah, that's pretty exciting.
Absolutely. People, like, drugs and alcohol are a real common thing. The world seems to be full of fear and anxiety and availability of these things to self-medicate. It's all too common. Do you know the statistics on if a person gets into that and before they know it, they're, as you said, married to it? How many people actually become addicted to drugs or alcohol and are ever able to escape? What are the stats on that? And not die or go to prison or go crazy because of the effect over long term of drugs and alcohol?
The one statistic that I have read, and I think it's fairly accurate, is that of the people who could use help with drugs and alcohol, just that big block of people, they're not necessarily looking for help, but they need the help. There's a lot of those out there. Approximately 10% of them only ever get into any kind of a recovery program. 90% of them never latch on to this, right? Of those that come in, okay, that get here, about 10% of them actually get sober and stay sober. So the number of people that do all the necessary things to come in and stay in, what's the saying? Doing whatever it takes, which is a very important part of recovery. No matter what it takes today, the most important thing that I've got to do every day is not drink, not do drugs. And, that's out. I can't do that, which is a lot of the reason I do the rest of the stuff. So we're looking at a relatively small percentage overall of the people who could learn to be sober to get the help they need. Now, there's another part of this that I deal with, which is the number of people who have drugs and alcohol problems and are in prison have very, very difficult traumatic childhoods. It's almost a universal. And the curriculum is kind of based around that. And the trauma reactions, which don't go away, you don't outgrow them in most cases. People say things like, oh, just get over it. Well, they can't get over it. That's the problem. And incorporating that in and seeing the relationship between that and the drugs and alcohol addiction, which is, they're like married together. The drugs and alcohol become the solution to the trauma.
Like by choice, self-medicating?
Self-medicating. We all do it. We all do it.
And let's talk about that, because not everybody who goes through those, I would imagine, ends up in prison. But a lot of people go through early traumas and live with them the rest of their life and are just, missing out on life because they can't. What kind of things do people go through? And because some of our listeners may actually have gone through, and I'm imagining abuse and.
Oh yeah, I hear stories that I'll be real honest. I will assign homework and I'll get the homework back, and sometimes there's tears because it's ugly stuff. I mean, it's off the scale compared to what my experiences were. I was grading homework last night actually, and one of the homework that I got back, which just struck me. And the question was, when does the pain stop? When does the pain stop? Because the pain is intense and it's never ending. And you can't run from it, you can't hide from it, you can't medicate it, and there's nothing that you can do other than somehow try to survive the pain.
Unless, I mean, there's got to be an intervention out there, some like that's
Yes.
part of what. Okay.
And yeah, the good news is that there's now recovery from trauma, just like there's recovery from addiction. It exists. It can be done, which is kind of what I got involved in. But it's truly, I read something that said statistically, if we could eliminate childhood trauma in this country, right? We could eliminate childhood trauma in this country. We would eliminate, or practically eliminate, 70% of the most serious physical and mental illnesses in this country. 70% by eliminating childhood trauma. Now that includes things like heart conditions, right? That includes some of the worst physical difficulties that we have. And they've traced them back and they've done the research, and they come out of childhood trauma. There's no other way to put it. It's been documented, it's been studied, they've done it over and over again. And it's a pretty sad thing.
What are childhood traumas? Can you give us a list of several of the most common? Like, I just imagine that someone's out there listening saying, I'm miserable in life, can't get my ducks in a row. And a second part of that is, are they always something that a person might remember having gone through, or could it exist and they're, the victim of it, or however that's called, and here they are years later wondering why they're struggling?
That's the problem. Because invariably you don't remember the cause, you don't remember the source. Many of us are very frustrated because it's like we can almost see it, but we can't get to it, if that makes any sense. The worst form of childhood abuse is not physical, it's not sexual. It's being ignored. It's being rejected. That's the worst thing you can do to a child. So, in a lot of families, the child comes home from school, there's a mother and the father, and how did you do in school today? And there's somebody following up and kind of keeping an eye on things. And the child needs that desperately. Needs it. Needs that when they have difficulty at school, somebody sits down and goes, tell me about this, let me listen to this, right? Very important. But in a lot of homes, the most insecure place that these kids get on a daily basis, the place with the most fear in their lives, is their home. Right?
Not safe, not recognized,
It's
not fed.
It's physical, it's verbal, it's it's being ignored, it's being constantly criticized. Why are you so stupid? Why can't you drill sergeant type parents, right? Okay, you got a B in this class. Why didn't you get an A? You should have gotten an A. If you were smart, you'd get an A, right?
Let me ask. My wife is a teacher, and it's a nicer school, and a lot of the parents are what they call nowadays helicopter parents.
Yes.
And then I also see some kids from other schools that are just driven so much to perform and get good grades, and they've got crazy schedules of sports and classes and tutors and study, and I just think they're going to make psychotic humans out of these. They're not coming from poverty. In fact, quite the opposite.
Quite the opposite.
But there's still an abuse and a demand, and I guess some ideal picture that's trying to be created, and
it is abuse. And from the parents' point of view, I'm sure they look at it. I love my child. I want to give them every opportunity in the world, and I'm doing this so that they get every opportunity in the world, and I can send them to Harvard when they're done and all that kind of stuff. I'm sure that's their motivation. At the same time, it can cause, maybe not for everybody, maybe there's people that respond to that. Maybe there's people that feed on that, and that's exactly what they need. But for a lot of children, it's very, very, very destructive. That's just no other way to put it. And again, this has been studied and documented and evaluated and all that kind of stuff. And it's that can be for some children, you know, things that you go through that you're never able to get rid of in your life. You carry that with you, that rejection with you in your life, and leads to very low self-esteem, lots of interpersonal problems, lots of difficulty relating to other people. Yeah.
Mental health nowadays is a big topic, and we see fear and anxiety and drug abuse prevalent, and alcoholism, and just all sorts of things. What would you say, or I mean, well, I know you're not a doctor, but you've probably got some observations. So if you have any of these issues, please go see a medical professional. But just some kind of, perhaps anecdotal, like one thing that occurs to me: social media, cell phones.
Don't get me started.
Well, no. But
No.
Let's talk to the young people that are very involved in that. You know, now we've got as you look at your phone, we've got people who are born now and have never not had access to, shut up kid, here's, play with mommy's phone. Or then I want mine. And so by the ripe old age of 5 or 6, they're given this device that can do so much. What kind of factor does that play in?
Huge. I saw a video one time which really got my attention, and they had 2 therapists, and they were working with a 2-year-old child, 2 years old, and they would give the child various toys to play with, and then they'd ask for the toys back, and the child would hand the toys back. They gave the child a phone, 2 years old, gave him a phone. I guess got him started on how to play with it. And they get to the point where they ask for the phone back. Right? And they did this like 5 or 6 times that I watched. And universally, every time the child was asked for the phone back, the child did this.
Wow.
This is 5 or 6 different children, 5 or 6 times. All the other toys went back. This one they wanted to keep. I believe that a lot of social medias are present to create addiction to social medias. I mean, let's face it, it's a big money maker. It's huge, it's enormous. And the idea is, and I'm sure you and I have both run into it, right? I've got a fascination with solitaire for some reason.
Okay.
We all do it, okay? And, you can see teenagers hiding in their room, not coming out, not learning how to socialize, and all of a sudden they're kicked out into the big wide world and they've got no people skills. And God help you, and I'm sure your wife is a teacher and I'm sure she's run into this. God help you if you take the phone away from a kid, right?
Sure.
It's always a war, and the principal has to get involved. Yes, always. So yeah, I think these are lethal and they need tended to. Yes. What can the parents do? Monitor the situation. Maybe put some kind of daily limit on it, something, to where this doesn't become the most important thing in their life.
I know that you have studied a lot of brain science and neurochemistry, and again, while you're not a doctor, you're real knowledgeable about this. How similar is the effect of what a phone or a video game or something does to our brain chemistry, the dopamine, all that, compared to drugs or alcohol or food or
virtually
sugar?
identical.
Isn't that wild?
All addictions, regardless of what it is, the damage to our central nervous system and to our brains is basically very similar, always. It's repeated over and over again. They're all dangerous, right? Now, obviously, you take something like you take something like, I can't remember the name of the current deadly drug that's on that. That's
Ketamine or
not ketamine.
or
fentanyl.
Okay.
You take a drug like fentanyl, and that stuff's lethal. I mean, that could be a one hit. That's it. You're dead. It's over, and it's done with. Okay, that's dangerous enough. But the guy who does take it and who does survive, and maybe does it for repeated years, right? Maybe mixing in other substances with it, the damage he's doing to his central nervous system and his brain is just, it's off the scale. I mean, things that are supposed to work one way don't work at all anymore, right? You can't, number one, you shut down all the feel-good chemicals that we're supposed to take, we're supposed to manufacture in our bodies. And the body doesn't produce them anymore because it's getting it externally. So the body is, by just that fact, not functioning the way it's supposed to. And you tack on 20 years of that kind of abuse, morning, noon, and night, it's a long road back.
And cell phones are relatively new, clearly in human evolution. You had smartphones literally for 10 or 12 years.
Right.
It'll be interesting to see, because the powers that be, and if you follow the money, they're not going to want to give up.
Oh, no. I predict there's already treatment centers for electronic media.
Really?
I believe electronic media is now the 5th largest addiction. I believe it's up to 5.
Incredible.
Right, already. And there are treatment centers that specialize in it.
What would the other ones be? Alcohol, drugs, sex, gambling, food?
Well, there's alcohol. There's a variety of drugs.
Okay.
There's opiates. There's cocaine. They all get their own separate category. Yeah. And again, I believe with all of that, all the different drugs that are available, electronic media, last I looked, was up to 5.
Okay, that's stunning, and yet everyone can have one, and there's no rule. Like, you can't drive a car till you're 15, 16. You can't buy a gun till you're 18, or you can't smoke till you're 18 or 21.
Yeah.
Drink, but you can have a phone at 2 or whatever.
And you're going to scream and yell at your parents if you don't get one.
Well, then there's the social, like everybody else has one. Why can't
I've got to have one.
Right.
Exactly.
Amazing.
And the poor parents are trapped in that. What are you going to do?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, back to happiness.
Yeah.
Daily routine. If you could go back to your younger self and tell yourself how to live and do different things instead of spending the next X amount of years with drugs and alcohol or whatever mayhem you caused, what would you tell a young person or even your younger self to do differently?
I hear that question, and I can't even imagine what the answer would be to that. I mean, I know how different I was at that age. I certainly didn't envision the problems that I walked my way into. I suppose I keep thinking of the phrase, "Don't believe what you think is right."
Right.
Because I certainly, and I think most of us do that. We lead our lives in what we think is right for us. It looks like this is my best approach at this point.
Seemed like a good idea at the time.
Seemed like a good idea at the time.
Sure.
And again, we certainly can't see how long it's going to last and how far down that very slippery slope we got, right? And I didn't know it was a slippery slope while I was on it. You don't know, I guess you're on a slippery slope until you get to the bottom, and then you look around and go, how the hell did I do this? Right? Because it looked like a good idea.
Well, let me ask a different way. Specifically with drugs and alcohol, you've dealt with a lot of the people in the thing. What are some of the indications along the way that a person might not just be having a cocktail or a drink or two, but there might be problems ahead if they continue? What might someone be finding themselves in?
The frequency within I drank, with how often I drank, I think is certainly for most of us, even long before we're even able to begin to look at a problem. You know, it started with picking up a 6-pack of beer on the way home from work. That didn't seem like a big deal. Except I did it every day. I did it 7 days a week, right? Looking back on it, that was a very bad idea. I mean, every day you pick up the 6-pack of beer. And then the 6-pack of beer becomes a 12-pack, and it becomes a case, and it becomes alcohol or other alcohol rather than beer. I think frequency was a very big part of it. There wasn't a day, I don't think from the time I was certainly 20, 21 years old, there wasn't a day I didn't drink. I drank for breakfast.
Yum.
Yeah.
Breakfast of champions.
And obviously, when you're drinking your breakfast, obviously you have a problem. But it doesn't seem like it's a problem.
You mentioned community too. Now you're around a healthy community.
Yeah. Thank God.
What's the tendency of people when they're 21 and they're drinking a 6-pack to hang out with other people that are 21 drinking a 6-pack, as opposed to, you know what I'm saying? Like almost like birds of a feather.
That's a good question. Yeah, and invariably, you will find yourself hanging out with people that live their life the way you live their life. And that's certainly another thing to look at. If you're a teenager and you're starting to do things that you don't want mom and dad to know about, or maybe even your regular friends to know about, that's another sign.
Hiding things.
Hiding, oh yeah, that's
lying about things.
Every day, yes.
How about consequences? What kind of things might be occurring to a person?
For me, one of the fascinating parts about most addiction and mental health problems, separately or together, is that we can't see consequences. We are not aware of them.
How do you mean?
It never occurs to us, regardless of what we're told or anything else, that drinking every day is ever going to be a problem. We hear things like that. No, that's not true, right?
When you're young and it doesn't affect you, especially.
Exactly,
right? Yeah.
right. And not seeing consequences is to me, a very large part of why people have difficulties. Not seeing consequences. It's you're driving home from work and you need to stop and get more alcohol. But if you get more alcohol, you don't have enough money to put gas in the car. As an example, we've all probably been through that, right? Well, that's okay. That's no big deal. We'll get the alcohol and I'll figure out how to put gas in the car.
Okay.
But then I have that thought and I just kind of dismiss that. That's no longer something to think about because I've got my alcohol. And then I get up in the morning, I go to drive to work, and there's no gas in the car. Because we really don't have the ability, most of us, to see the consequences. We're masters of denial. We are masters of denial.
How much if there are consequences, let's say a person gets a DUI or they get arrested for fighting or they lose a job or they lose a relationship, well then it's obviously that the other people were wrong. That other car shouldn't have been there to hit, or the darn cops did it to me. Responsibility.
Another thing that we're masters at. We can turn anything around to where it is somebody's fault. If they hadn't behaved the way they behaved, I wouldn't have this difficulty. Therefore, I never take the time to look at myself. I have absolutely no ability. I had no ability to look at myself and see where I was wrong, where I could have taken a better path or done something. I couldn't do it. I had never done it.
Do you have that ability now?
Yes, very much.
Okay, that's huge.
Huge.
What I just heard you say is that being responsible for what you can do and not looking at what other people out there, you know, I just wrote something in an email yesterday. You know, we can't control the weather and the government and other people and taxes, right? Yet so many of us live our lives saying my life sucks because of all of those things. You know, we're all dealing with the same weather. It rained on both sides of the team. Why did yours lose?
Right.
Type of thing. So
yeah,
how can a person develop a deeper sense of ownership, responsibility? You know, how does that happen? And not pointing fingers, placing blame, and realizing, no, I'm a pull up your bootstraps type of guy as much as I can be, because or if it's up to me, or if meant to be.
I think again it does get, number one, for me it gets back to at the end, when I got to the point I had to do something, I had to change, right? That became the kind of driving force. I can no longer be the type of person I was, and obviously that's kind of a humongous thing to look at, right? How am I going to change all this? But I saw that change was necessary. And the big change was me realizing that me blaming other people for my difficulties was never constructive. I never convinced anybody that they needed to behave the way I thought they should behave, even though I had tried my entire life to get to people to get people to see that. It had never worked. Right? Like most of us, caused me to lose relationships and anger people and frustrate myself. So I think number one was being able to look at honestly what had happened and go, it didn't work. It just didn't work. I got to find some other way. There's something that I have to change, and what I have to change above all things is me.
That's big.
Yeah.
It's the only part of the equation in so many things, whether we're talking about alcohol or anything else. You can't change so many outside factors.
Right, you can't.
Maybe you can pick yourself up and move somewhere else, and the outside is different, but you're still there. You take you with you.
And I think we're always trying to change the outside, right? If I get the right car, if I get the right house, if I get the right job, if I get the right wife, right? I make all those changes, everything will be fine. And we try that. And then, of course, we try that and we go, this isn't working. It didn't work again. Yeah, so the end result is I have to change and continue to change. It's not, there will always be more work to do. Always.
I heard it said, everybody wants things to change, but they don't want to change, right? Everybody wants change, but they don't want to change, I guess is the way it said.
There was a quote, I just read it, I can't remember who it was by, but it said, everybody thinks about changing the world. No one thinks about changing themselves. Right.
What if a person's out there at whatever age and they're just like feeling hopeless, and not just necessarily with drugs or whatever. I don't want it to be that narrow, although I think that's a huge, there's hundreds of millions of people that can receive that specific message, to their benefit.
Right.
But just unhappiness, hopelessness, whatever. Are there any books you'd suggest that they read, or questions they ask themselves, or certain professionals they can go talk to get some guidance? And
certainly in the realm of professionals, and I would probably start there. Maybe there are counselors in school that they could talk to. your wife is a teacher and my wife is a teacher. And I would absolutely 100% put your teacher down as potentially a good source of information. And I know if they get your wife or my wife, that's what they're going to get.
Sure.
They're going to get some really good, stable advice based on their own experience, right? And there's a lot of really good, concerned teachers out there. And the first one you talk to doesn't help you, find another one. Just keep looking there. As far as outside of school,
In the working years.
there are, and you know, off the top of my head, I'd be hard pressed to tell you details on this. There are so many social services that are available at no cost that people don't know about. Okay, you can look them up. Okay, there's a lot of stuff in dealing with trauma, in dealing with mental health. One of the good things about electronic media is that there's a lot of information on there, which I routinely, you know, I'll ask questions of Google just like anybody else. Like, you know, I'll ask it a question and they spit back a lot of really good information. And of course, libraries has a lot of good information. The key is, okay, fine, I've looked at this. I am unhappy. I don't like the direction my life is going. I can't quite figure out how to steer this ship in a different direction, right? Kind of thing. The awareness is your first big tool. I need to do something.
Okay.
Right? And again, start asking questions. Find the people in your life that you can talk to. I highly recommend, there's a lot of different 12-step groups.
Okay.
And I'm a big fan of 12-step groups. And you can look them up. There are 12-step groups, of course, for alcohol and for drugs and for codependency and for, what was the last one?
Gambling is one.
Gambling has one.
How about porn? That's a big addiction nowadays.
Sex and love addicts addiction. Yeah, there's like 3 or 4 different programs for that.
Food?
And for food, yes. The reason I like 12 steps, I'm a big fan of 12 step, is number one, it's free and it is readily available wherever you are, right? And especially with one of the things that we got out of the pandemic was Zoom meetings.
Right.
And virtually all of them are available online for Zoom.
Neat.
So you can finish your dinner at 6:25 and be in a meeting at 6:30, and you don't even have to leave your house. And I highly recommend that.
Wonderful.
Yeah, that's a great source.
Thank you for that. Well, folks, I hope you've been getting a lot of good stuff out of this. Thank you so much for
I've
sharing
had fun,
this.
thank you.
Yeah. What have I not asked you that, here's your 15 minutes of fame, tell the world, you know.
I really can't think of anything offhand, John. I mean, I got to talk about what I do and why I do it and how it happened and all that kind of stuff, which is obviously it is a life-saving thing that has happened to me, and that no matter what's going on, it's a life-saving thing that happened to me, and I get to wake up every morning with that thought that I get to go and do this, and I'm a very fortunate human being.
Absolutely. You made me think of one thing, lots of things, but alcoholism, for example, it's not something that a person creates on themselves, right? It's probably, have they shown it's genetic?
They have shown that there are genetic components, yes.
Okay, well, here's where I'm going with that. For example, if a person's got the genes or the propensity or proclivity, or they laugh at my side of the family because it's Irish, right? Sorry, but you know, all right. So if I become an alcoholic, it's not my fault if I'm genetically predisposed and then I'm put in the, all right. But ultimately, unless I take the action to change me, it's going to kill me or hurt other people along the way.
Yes.
So I think, what's the word I'm looking for? A stigma. The embarrassment of someone coming out and saying, I've got a problem. And how can a person break that? Not just alcohol, but whatever it is. They're unhappy, they're thinking they're crazy, they're, depressed all the time, they're, how can a person,
It's a great question.
right? Get rid of I don't know if it's false pride or if it's a fear of being exposed, but getting past that to be able to find the help that's out there for them on the other side.
The environment that I work in, inside of a prison, and if you are an inmate, you are taught, and it is beaten into you, you don't tell people your secrets. You don't talk about what's going on with you. You keep it to yourself. That's the environment that they're in.
Okay.
And obviously that's something that has to be overcome, because you have to get to the point where you can openly admit the truth about what is going on with you. And a lot of people, that thing prevents you, for a lot of people, from getting into recovery. I know my first day, I was terrified of walking in there. And it was the scariest thing I had ever done in my life. And yet I did it because I was going to die. And I knew I had to do it. And it turned out to be a very, very big thing. But I watch people go through that all the time. They're afraid. There's such an overwhelming fear of admitting the truth about themselves. Right? It's tied into low self-esteem. It's tied into people-pleasing, codependency. A lot of the different difficulties we have is right there. And an inability to open your mouth and admit the truth about yourself. And yet, when you admit the truth about yourself, then it's freedom.
Well, there you go. That's the message, right? There is help out there. You're not alone. There's freedom on the other side. Find it. Talk to someone important to you. We mentioned teachers for the younger people. If you're in your working years and you've got insurance, perhaps there's
yes,
therapists, psychologists, that kind of thing.
Absolutely
Accessible.
Yes. Ask questions. There's a lot of help out there at no charge that people don't even know exists, and you can look it up online. I wish I could give you an easy way to look it up. I don't know of an easy way. Obviously, if you Google what is codependency, you're going to see a lot of it, right? Google depression or anxiety or any of the more common mental health difficulties, and it will. One of the things they do that's very good about these things is they will give you back information on it. I do it all the time. Yeah.
Okay, so if a person's not happy or they've got questions, seek answers, seek guidance, but don't hold it in.
Being unhappy, being angry, frustrated, depressed, however you want to put it, they are progressive. And they start out as annoying. I wish I was happier today kind of stuff. And it doesn't seem like a big deal. But because this stuff is progressive, it grows, it doesn't stay the same. And it starts out as a little small problem that is annoying. And my own experience is that little annoying problem can grow into, if untreated, can turn into a desire to die.
Wow.
It can turn into a desire to hurt other people. The prisons are filled with them. And the prisons are filled with a lot of educated people that had all the advantages, but they didn't attend to that. They didn't pay attention to it. And it landed them more than landed them.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, there you go. Don't let that happen.
Yeah.
Reach out, get help. Thank you so much, Dale,
Thank
for
you.
your time, your wisdom, sharing your
I
secrets
enjoyed
of
it.
happiness. This has been fantastic. Absolutely. Well, keep coming back, and we will see you on the next one. And if people would like to reach out to you, are you on social media? Would you be appropriate for them to reach out to, or?
Yeah, no problem. I would probably. I go on social media, but I don't spend much time there, quite frankly.
Okay. You don't have like a website or anything
No,
like that?
No, I do not. No.
If you have any questions, I do have access to Dale.
Yeah.
Reach out to me, and I'll funnel them to him and get back to you on that.
Yeah.
In the meantime, take care of yourselves, guys. Get the help if you need it. Don't, stay closed. I think that's one very simple message of the many that we got from here. Thanks for joining us today, and we will see you next time.
Thank you. That was fun.